Aloha and good morning, everyone. It is Monday, March 30, 2025. The time is 10:06 a.m. Will the Committee on Budget please come to order? I'd like to welcome to the committee members who are present in the chamber today. Committee Vice Chair Nishimoto, Council members Kia'aina, Cordero, and Talba. We also like to welcome Council Member Dos Santos Tam and Council Member Tupola. Although remote oral testimony is being permitted, this is a regular in-person meeting and not a remote meeting by interactive conference technology under HRS Section 92-3.7. Therefore, the meeting will continue notwithstanding loss of audiovisual communication with remote testifiers or loss of the public broadcast of the meeting. Members of the public will be allowed to provide oral testimony on all items on the agenda in two ways: in person in the council chamber and remotely via video conference or phone. Remote and in-person oral testimony will be allowed when each agenda item is taken up. Before testifying, each person shall state their name. Each speaker may not have anyone else read their statement and is limited to a 1-minute presentation on each item. As both English and Hawaiian are official languages of the state of Hawaii, pursuant to Article 15, Section 4 of the Hawaii State Constitution, and Section 1-13 of the Hawaii Revised Statutes, members of the public may testify in either language. For oral testimonies offered in Olelo, Hawaii, additional time, as may be necessary, will be allowed for the testifier to provide in an English translation of their testimony. All persons who have registered to testify in person will be called upon first. When your name is called, please come up to the testifier podium. Persons who have not registered will be given an opportunity to testify following the registered testifiers. After in-person testimony has concluded, I'll proceed to remote testimony via video conference or phone. When I call your name, please monitor your screen and follow the prompt to unmute. For those who are joining us by telephone only, please press *9 if you wish to testify, and I will identify you by the last 3 digits of your phone number. When your number is called, please listen for the prompt to unmute and press *6. Some friendly reminders and tips: video conference from a quiet location if possible. If you are also watching the proceedings on Olelo, please mute your television at the time you are called to testify. When the timer on screen reaches 0, please conclude your remarks promptly. Written testimonies, including the testifier's address, email address, and phone number, will be available to the public as described on the posted agenda. As a courtesy, please turn off or silence all cell phones for the duration of this meeting. Members, I plan to break for lunch today. The start time and duration will be dependent on the flow of the meeting. I'd like to also welcome to the chamber Council Chair Waters. Moving on to agenda item number 1, for action, Bill 22-2026, approving the Executive Operating Budget and Program for the fiscal year, July 1st, 2026 to June 30, 2027. Members will proceed first with in-person oral testimony in the council chamber. Clerks, do we have any in-person testifiers for this item?
Chair, there are none.
Thank you. Proceeding on with remote testimony. Clerks, do we have any remote testifiers for this item?
Chair, there are none.
Thank you. Members, we'd like to welcome from the administration all the department directors and deputy directors. And we will begin at this time with review of the operating budget on page 1, General Government Managing Director. I'd like to welcome to the chamber, aloha and good morning, Director Formby.
Good morning, Budget Committee Chair Okimoto, Vice Chair Nishimoto, and Budget Committee members. Mike Formby, Managing Director. So, Budget Chair, we have our department directors here to speak to the amendments, proposed amendments, and their budgets. And I wasn't sure for your purposes whether you wanted me to start first with a discussion about the potential budget impact on operating CIP relative to my Mayor's Message 3226.
Managing Director, perhaps we'll plan to take that up tomorrow.
Okay.
We'll go with the agenda today for the operating budget.
That's better.
Thank you.
Tomorrow I'll have more detail. I did have a handout for the council today, and by tomorrow I'll have more granularity on that handout. But today, Director Andy Kawano is here to speak for the administration.
Okay, thank you. So members, you should have thank you, Managing Director, and aloha and welcome, Director Kawano. I think what I'll do, Director Kawano, and we'll, hopefully this will flow properly. I'm gonna go line by line, and then the members will have the opportunity to ask questions. So I'll start with, I'm sorry, did you wanna share before I begin? Okay.
Thank you, Budget Chair Okimoto, Council Chair Waters, Honorable Council Members, Andy Kawano, Director of Budget and Fiscal Services. As you go through the CD1 worksheets for the Executive Operating Budget and the CIP budget, we would sincerely appreciate if you allow our department heads and designees to testify with regard to amendments that they feel could, impair operations in their departments. So we would appreciate that if possible. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Director Kawano. Members, what I'll plan to do is we'll go line by line from the worksheets that were handed out, and we'll start on the first line with the Managing Director under City Management. The description is to add expense funds, and the proposed amendment is $200,000. The recommendation is to accept but amend description to read, add funding for current expenses and proviso at least $200,000 out of current expenses shall be approved for a visitor center at Kuhio Beach Park in collaboration with the Waikiki Business Improvement District Association. Good morning, Deputy Director Jerome.
Good morning, Budget Director and Council members. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. With respect to this item, if it is intended for the Waikiki bid, we'll work with you, Budget Chair, and we'll have a discussion with Andy Kawano, because there's a better place to place it, which is how we work with the bid is through the Department of Facilities and Maintenance. So that's one issue. The other item is we would like to have a better understanding of what the item intends to do. We recognize the importance of Waikiki and making things better and better there as a visitor experience. But given what's going on currently, we are going to be very mindful about what we can and can't afford. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Director. Members, we'll start lines of questions. I think I'll start with our committee vice chair, and then we'll work our way around and kind of follow the same order that we've been doing so far in our hearings. Committee Vice Chair Nishimoto, Councilmember Tolba, Councilmember Dos Santos Tam, Councilmember Kia Aina. I'm on page 1. Okay. Councilmember Tupola, Councilmember Cordero, Chair Waters. Nope. Okay. Thank you. Councilmember Cordero, just making sure that, did you have any questions on this specific line item? The first one. Okay. Thank you. Moving on to next item on page 1 from the Office of Economic Revitalization. The current bill has 24 positions with a $2,054,684. The description is to reduce positions and funding for salaries. Amended 20 positions, which would amount, the proposed amendment is to reduce it by $1,620,000 and $1,620,584. And the recommendation is to accept the position reduction of 20 positions. Oh, okay. Sorry, Deputy Director, I'm just going to read all 3, and then we'll have you comment on that and go to questions. Thank you. The next proposed is from the OER office as well. 24 positions, $2,054,684 from the general funds. Add positions and funding for salaries for 3 community equity liaison positions. The proposed amendment is, again, to accept the 3 positions at $224,000, $224,304, and the recommendation is to accept it, the 3 positions, with the amount of $224,304 from the general funds. And finally, from OER as well, the proposed amendment is to reduce funding for current expenses of $411,669, and the recommendation is to accept it with a reduction of $411,669 from the general funds. Thank you, Deputy Director.
Thank you, Budget Chair. With respect to the OER proposals, we believe OER does incredible work. It does meaningful work. And, you know, with this, there's always room for improvement. And maybe there are room for some nip and tuck there. But I'll have Director Asselbay come up and discuss. But the very first proposal to basically reduce it substantially, we're very much opposed.
Thank you, Deputy Director. Aloha, good morning, Director Asselbay.
Good morning, Budget Chair Okimoto, council members. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today. My name is Amy Asselbay. I'm the Director of the Office of Economic Revitalization. With regard to cutting the funding for the Office of Economic Revitalization, we really feel that recent reports from UHERO, from the state, not to mention the floods that have devastated many of our local businesses, many of our farmers. Our work across sectors with our state partners, with our city partners, and with private organizations is critical at this time to help families, businesses, and farmers to recover once again, and underscores the importance of some of the funding that we have today from the Economic Development Administration to create more resilient businesses so they're better prepared when disaster strikes, whether it be natural or man-made disasters, as well as to get their employees and their businesses back to work as soon as possible. Our team has been up at the Community Assistance Center since the day it opened. We've been supporting the city's efforts, but I do have to note that in some of the recent hearings that we've been participating in the broader community in terms of economic development, Chair Bonham of the University of Hawaii Economic Research Organization has stressed that while the reports indicate Hawaii has had a hard time springing back from the pandemic and our economic recovery here is slower than the rest of the nation, there are many factors, that being our isolation or other things that we can't change. But what he emphasized is now is the time to put more dollars into economic development rather than take it away, because this is what we need to focus on for the future of our islands, for opportunities in terms of economic diversification, workforce training, and small business support, as well as supporting our farmers to be sustainable and diversified across this island, supporting innovation and technology through the enhancement of our broadband infrastructure, and the opportunity we have with the Oahu Tourism Strategic Plan to better coordinate across city departments and with our partners in private industry on the Oahu Tourism Strategic Plan.
Thank you, Director. Members, we'll start with questions for the Director, starting with Councilmember Tolba. Thank you, Councilmember Dos Santos Tam.
Thank you. I have 3 questions. With respect to OER, to what extent is the department or is the office grant funded?
Almost all of our program funding for everything we run is grant funded, either federal or private grants that have supported what is today around $3.1 million in programmatic activities that the office runs.
So will reducing these positions negatively impact the city's ability to get grants, especially in the context of reduced federal availability of grants, reduced potentially state availability of grants, and tightening of the private sector?
Mm-hmm. So I think the work that we've been able to do, thanks to the council, to train our team, to professionalize our team in their ability to go after and successfully receive awards for federal or other private funds, we're really moving forward in terms of the opportunities and the infrastructure that we've developed with the support of our grants contractor, whether it be the weekly list that we receive and populate in terms of what federal grants are available, categorizing them for the departments that they might be helpful to or supportive of builds up to the work that the new team in the managing director's office is just now getting underway. And so we've really built out a template or a prototype with what we're doing to bring more revenue to the city for competitive grants, whether they be federal or private funds, which we think we can leverage more and better in the future. But that requires staff with the relationships, with the knowledge, and with the capacity to go after those grants.
So if you don't have these 20 positions, does that negatively impact your availability or ability to get these grants?
Yes.
Last question is, I understand OER is in the process of leasing out office space right now, along with another city office or something like that. If these positions are cut, are we just going to be sitting on a bunch of office space that the city's leasing out?
Presently, we do not have a signed lease, and so it would impact, obviously, economic development and the role that we play in the city with our partners across the state and in private industry. But we do believe that this move will be strategic with the potential that OER and CCSR will be located in Chinatown and better able to coordinate and work in an area that has been a priority of both this council and the mayor for economic revitalization. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Dos Santos Tam, Councilmember Kiaina, Councilmember Tupola.
Yeah, quick question. If I could, for Deputy Managing Director, just like an overall broad question. I'm still looking through the worksheets now, but I think one of the thoughts that some had maybe brought up in some of the hearings was the possibility of having OER be a part of or maybe join forces with DES, seeing as though they are a kind of economic engine for the city. They kind of handle contracts, they handle bringing more money into the city, marketing, like getting some of the things that we need to get done as far as like leveraging as much relationships across different departments. Does the administration have any thoughts about maybe the effectivity of that?
So, Councilmember, thank you for asking the question and raising the issue. The fundamental nature of my first sort of knee-jerk reaction is that the fundamental nature of DES is very different from what OER does. DES is a revenue generating, providing sort of the zoo, the NBC golf courses. It's providing these quality of life opportunities for public while revenue generating. OER is slightly different. OER is not about revenue generation so much as increasing the overall health and vitality of our economy. So it feels different right now, and we haven't had that discussion, but it's certainly something we can raise with Managing Director and Mayor.
It's just a thought. I mean, I do think that in general, some of the discussions have hovered around who is kind of responsible for policy direction in regards to revenue generation. Would it be, Director Kawano? Would it be OER? Would it be DES? Because all of them kind of have something to do with funds coming into the city or us being able to generate more funds. So it's a thought. I think, if anything, I'm hoping that we might be able to consolidate efforts where I really think we've never seen a certain broad policy regarding what our revenue generation plan is. And I do think that within the OER charter, guidance, it was to provide broad policy advice to yourselves, the administration, to us on policy that we can change, that can increase the economic vitality of our communities. And that's kind of one of the pieces that we haven't seen. Is we have heard about maybe one or two bills that are interesting, but where are the policy pieces that we can move to be more helpful to kind of generate that economic stability and forward direction, as opposed to kind of little pieces here and there?
Yeah, thank you. And I would say that with respect to revenue generation as a whole, BFS has the biggest voice in it because DES does have its limited areas that it covers.
Yeah, I think just in our general hearings about with BFS, Director Kawana has quite a few other things going on. So we're hoping that possibly one day in the future, OER can be more of the policy guidance in that area because they are more like a broad entity as opposed to like a detailed one that's also doing procurement, also doing contracts. They are somebody that can kind of have a higher view of like all the different departments and how we can kind of connect better. So hopefully there can be some kind of direction in that way, because I think if everyone is in the weeds and everyone has all these different programs they're running, then no one really oversees broad strategy in regards to revenue generation.
Thank you. And all the departments that you mentioned are here, so we can have that discussion. They're hearing from you directly. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councilmember Tupola. Councilmember Cordero.
Thank you, Chair Okimoto. First off, thank you very much for accepting the community liaison equity positions. I do have a question for the Director of OER. I was wondering, with that amount being rectified and hopefully accepted by the committee, will that allow for better even language access as it relates to different departments, especially when it comes to emergency outreach? I got a lot of direct messages to both of my Instagram pages about different language access during the last few weeks of Honolulu storm. So I was just wondering if those positions will assist in that.
Yes, is the answer. Well, that is a portion of their role in the big picture. In a time like this, with response to the flood, it becomes a primary role in terms of the ability of our community with different language needs to be able to access both city and private resources that are being made available. So one of our staff on our community equity team has been out there every single day, and others are joining for the other services, as well as that interaction with farmers and businesses as this recovery continues.
Okay, thank you. And currently, if we don't have that, while it is accepted, if the committee accepts it, will we have to contract for other types of language access or no?
Through the prosecuting attorney's office, the city has an overall master agreement to be able to contract with entities and pay for translation and interpretation services. But the staff that we've hired we made sure that they were bilingual or trilingual in the case of one of them, so that we can provide better interaction in the language that people feel most comfortable communicating in.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councilmember Cordero. Chair Waters, any questions? Okay, I had just a couple of quick questions before we go on to the next item. Can you, if you know the information, how many positions in OER remain contract positions?
All of our positions at the Office of Economic Revitalization are contract positions because we are exempt included staff under the Office of the Mayor.
Okay, then how many positions have been filled via civil service?
We do not have any civil service positions in the Office of Economic Revitalization, nor in any of the offices under the Office of the Mayor.
Okay, thank you very much. Members, any further questions? Councilmember Tolba.
This question for either the budget director or a deputy director. My question is, if the council moves forward with the amendment, how does this work practically? Are these 20 people let go come July 1st?
Well, that would be a very difficult challenge for us. Managing Director Mike Formby. So it's very interesting for me. I'm going to speak frankly with the council. I think part of the problem that we have with the Department of Economic Revitalization is that the vast majority of the work that they do manifests itself in intangibles. And those are very difficult to measure. And it's a very difficult thing to provide the council and the community metrics to say this is what we've done. But when you're educating people and you're helping them attain qualifications for jobs that they previously would not have been eligible for, when you're helping people in the community form businesses, business incubators, when you're out trying to encourage the community to accept business programs that they're not familiar with, better accounting, techniques, better way to run businesses. You don't see those things in metrics that you can put on paper, but you hope over time, from a UHERO perspective, what you see is a growth of economic development in the county. And so I think the measurements that show that come over time, and I think they're only going to get better. We're looking at big things like distributed advanced manufacturing, which will help us cut our supply chain reliance to the mainland. We're looking at new technologies for waste processing. We're looking at artificial intelligence and how it might help the city and businesses be more productive and more efficient. Without those positions, we can't do that. And so I'm a firm believer in the need for an economic revitalization department. I think what we have to work with council on is a better way of communicating to you and the public the good work that we're doing.
Okay, so again, if we move forward, these jobs are done by July 1st.
If you move forward, then these positions are no longer funded. That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Toba. Councilmember Tupola?
For Managing Director, please. Aloha, Managing Director. Thanks for everything. I know you've been doing many, many things besides standing here in front of us at this hearing, so thank you. I do want to just make a brief comment based on what you said. I think one of the things, Managing Director, that we've found some difficulty in myself, I won't speak for anybody else, I do think that some of the actions that are done in OER are things that SBA does, Chamber of Commerce does, and maybe we do it on a more, minimum level, like we're not helping the same ones as them, but anytime we're doing those kind of actions that are kind of like what a nonprofit could do or these other things, then we become less useful because there are so many people that have issue with the city, right? How we work, how we help or how we don't help or how we hinder or other things. And I just kind of want to iterate that again because I believe that the stronghold that OER could have that hasn't been had is that policy guidance. Like if there was a specific package of bills from OER that all these things are what the council could do and the administration could do, I just think that in the city, and I'll just use an example of me being out in the community has like little tiny things and everybody's helping and all the little tiny things, they equal a lot. But when the city comes in, they have stuff nobody else has. Nobody owns Vector trucks. Nobody has industrial sized pumps. So it's like, that's kind of where the weight comes, you know? And so like, that's kind of what we're looking for here is like, when we bring in weight with budget items, policy changes, laws that need to be repealed, those kind of things where it's like, now we're not just helping 7 businesses, we're helping 27,000 businesses because they all had this issue, whatever it was. So I just want to iterate that because I don't want to discount any of the good work they're doing. I think they are doing good work. I'm trying to figure out how can we elevate that work to a level where our impact is exactly what needed to be felt during these storms, which is once the city gets in there, boom, a huge difference is made because we bring resources no one else has. We're the one that has control over all the departments. We're the ones that have cabinet meetings where we can bring issues up and get things resolved. So I hope that makes sense. And I'm not sure, what lies ahead, but I think like there is places where we can kind of surge those efforts together with other departments that have those kind of movements that we really need. Because I don't think we don't need all of it. I just don't think we need any of the duplicative stuff. I think we need like a real strong policy direction. That's just a thought.
Council member, I appreciate those comments, and I'm always looking for ways to do things better and to elevate the good work that we do. So we're happy to have those conversations with you and council.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councilmember Tupola. Councilmember Kia Aina.
Managing Director, may I suggest that perhaps prior to the next budget hearing, because this is serious, what's being proposed. And if you heard my comments from the initial hearing, it pains me to be in this position as someone who has not just authorized initiatives, but funded initiatives that I care deeply about and that I feel that OER's mission is targeted for. But for me to also just have concerns in general about the direction should be concerning for the administration. So all I could say is that I think you need to intervene. And if during the next budget, you would like a reconsideration, I think that kind of discussion needs to be had.
Councilmember, I appreciate that. We heard what you said. We take it seriously, and we will work on that.
Thank you, Councilmember Kia'aina. Members, any further discussion for the Managing Director's office? Thank you for being here, Director Formby. Okay, seeing no further discussion, members, we will now move on to page 2, Customer Services Department. So following our spreadsheet going line by line, from the Department of Customer Services, we have a Division of Motor Vehicles. Current amount is $13,956,215. The proposed amendment is to add current expense funds of $100,000, and the recommendation is to accept but amend description to read, add funding for current expenses, add proviso, at least $100,000 out of current expenses shall be appropriated for feral chicken removal services. Again, the amount is $100,000 from the general funds. And with us this morning, we have from CSD, Director Hashiro. Thank you for being with us.
Hi, good morning. Budget Chair Okimoto, Vice Chair Nishimoto, members. Kim Hashiro, Director for the Department of Customer Services. With respect to this council ad of an additional $100,000, just wanted to inform council that we have been providing this service to the community since fiscal 2024. We have 2 programs, essentially city services or city property, and then also private property participation. And over the last few years, we have expended, for example, in fiscal 2025, just over $100,000 for these 2 programs. In fiscal 2026 to date, we have expended about $85,000 for these programs. These programs are still ongoing and active. We respond to community concerns, council member concerns, and our budget is actually adequate at the current level. So while we appreciate the additional resources, we're actually okay in terms of our budget and continuing these services at the current level.
Members, if we have questions for Director Hashiro, Councilmember Tupola.
Hi, aloha, Director. And in regards to this one, the feral chicken is separate than Humane Society, correct?
That's correct.
So just a question, not for today, but maybe in the future. If you guys are adequate here, and I know we've had conversations about the current Humane Society contract, would this be something that could help in that area?
So the Humane Society is not focused on feral chicken.
No, I mean, like,
mitigation.
if instead of doing the feral chickens, we allocated the money to help them, like with the spade and neuter that we're very, very underfunded to try to run in our communities, would that be helpful?
That would be a possibility in terms of redirecting resources. But yes, we would want to have conversations about that because, as discussed, the Humane Society contract is quite large. And I think it's really a matter of what those, what funding is going towards what services.
Just last question, is there a possibility we could do a supplemental amendment to their contract if we put this aside just for spade and neuter in the homeless encampment areas where I need the help?
So right now, we're working with them regarding a future contract. Their contract is year to year, and it's tied to the fiscal year.
Right.
So there would be an opportunity in the future to discuss future funding and expanding spay and neuter.
Okay, thank you so much, Director. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councilmember Tupola. Any further discussions for the Director? Okay. Thank you so much for being here and for your input, Dr. Hashiro. Members, now moving on to the Department of Budget and Fiscal Services. Dealing with real property. The proposed amendment is to add current expense funds of $15,000, and the recommendation is to accept but amend description to read, add funding for current expenses, add proviso, at least $15,000 out of the current expenses shall be appropriated for BFS RPAD's annual home exemption education campaign, again for the amount of $15,000. And with us, thank you for being with us, Director Kawano.
Budget Chair Okimoto, Andy Kawano, Director of Budget and Fiscal Services. I would like to thank you for the $15,000 ad for education of property homeowner exemptions. I would like to state that our real property assessment team currently has an outreach program in place, and they've been diligently doing the outreach to property owner groups, to the Board of Realtors, to financial institutions, and I believe that they're doing a very good job, and they're doing it within their current budget, allocated budget. So we thank you for the consideration, but BFS would like to suggest that we decline the amendment, and we feel that we can cover this outreach through our current budget. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Director Kawano. Members, questions for Director Kawano? I'll start with Councilmember Kia-Aina, followed by Councilmember Tupola.
Thank you, Director. And this is an issue that I care deeply about, but I want to know that in their outreach efforts, do they have the funds necessary for a media campaign?
They use the media as needed, and I know we can lever the mayor's comms team to do that. I don't think the out-of-pocket would be such that we would require the additional $15,000.
Okay, I just want to make sure that, because I do see that, since the mayor started and the colleagues who started with me at the same time, this has been an issue, a reoccurring issue, and I do feel that there's a lot of people, these are the people who fall in the cracks, right? The people who have spouses die, or their parents or their grandparents, and so I feel that we need to every year strengthen our capacity to do a better job than we did the last year. That's all. And so if you're saying that, then I understand that you're trying your best, and then the 15,000 probably would not make a dent in your overall outreach efforts. Is that correct?
That is correct. I feel I'm confident that our property assessment team is doing everything that they can within their capacity.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Tupola.
Thank you. Thank you, Director. And thank you, Councilmember Kia-Aina, for the clarification on the ad. I think just as a general suggestion, not just to you, but everyone coming in the upcoming lines, maybe it would be advantageous for us to ask the question, we don't need this funding, but where could we do better in this area that you guys see? Because say, for example, like with this, she just shared, oh, this is what I'm seeing. People whose spouses die don't know about X. So then that would be like, okay, we can take this back to the team. Maybe this is a population that's a little bit more niche. We don't need to run radio ads or news ads per se, but maybe we need to get into a group of people, I don't know, with mortuaries or other avenues besides the Board of Realtors to kind of hit that group. Because again, for a lot of these individuals, they're older. I don't know if, probably newspaper ad, different things, different things than what we're currently doing. So I'm just suggesting that because I'm guessing that for the rest of these lines, everyone's going to stand up and say, we don't need this. I think that's fine. But if we could kind of figure out like where the middle ground is, or maybe where we could improve things, because I think if there is a way for us to kind of help those families, that's where we've seen the need with the real property taxes. People who just, they're in the middle of their spouse's finances, who's passed and maybe don't know these things. So anything you can do to help that, I know that's been something that we've been trying to mitigate.
Thank you, Councilmember Tupola. We appreciate your suggestions and thoughts, and we'll factor those in this year.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councilmember Tupola. Councilmember Cordero.
Thank you, Chair Okimoto. Hi, Director Kawano. Actually, thank you, Council Vice Chair Tupola. That's kind of why I wouldn't let them say things until we had questions when I was budget chair before. And I know the admin got upset, but I just wanted to note and ask a question. Throughout the last 5 years, we've been battling with the administration relating to marketing the home exemption programs. And you also noted that there may not even be enough space when people get their bills and notices and notifications. I know that Chair Waters tried to even just get things like another flyer added to the bill, right? And so 15,000, I know it seems minimal in comparison to the whole budget, but 15,000 can pay for postage, printing, for the whole island, for all the properties and homes. So I was wondering, if it's not this $15,000 ad, then what efforts has BFS made to include that into the real property bills?
We took a look at adding that information in, and we actually have information with
Right.
regard to including the spouse in the account. My suggestion would be, and I've stated this before, is that we seriously consider after budget looking at real property tax ordinance in general through a permitted interaction group. I've said that over and over and over. I would appreciate if council members would consider that, because I think perhaps structurally, in terms of the law, we can make improvement.
Thank you, Director Kawano. I know that that's the recommendation, but I'm just wondering, what were the improvements since we've been discussing this for 5 years now about notifying people about the home exemption? I know that is included. It could be even small, because you mentioned, like, this is what's all included on the notification and then the bill itself. So what other ways, other than, printing another page that goes along with the bill?
I would say if you look at our website, if you've gone there recently, the website has been improved and it's easier to find information on exemptions. That's one thing. I would also say that our team, in terms of their outreach to talk to people, they're continuing to add different groups that have interest in learning more about their exemptions.
Right.
Or dedications and things like that. So they're constantly going out to educate, to talk to different groups that have an interest in learning more about real property tax. In fact, it's a difficult, very difficult. I think it's hard for some people. I recently took a call when everything closed down that Friday, when everybody essentially was sent home. I took a call from a taxpayer. He was elderly, and he had a hard time finding the page. So I was following through direction to him on my own computer in the office.
Yeah.
And he essentially just got lost. So I had to read his, and all he wanted to know is if his exemption was in place and if his payments were credited. So I had to do that for him and told him that he's okay. But
Right.
I can see the challenge for some people that really need assistance.
Right.
So all I can say is that we'll continue our outreach and
Thank you.
expand what we do.
So I appreciate that. And that example is something that all of our offices probably have to go through from ourselves, with a constituent right there, or our staff. And I know that that's why when we are asking for certain requirements, having $15,000 amount would help with those type of instructions. You know what I mean? I think your personal experience going through it with a person or with someone who's getting lost on the website is a good example of what should be promoted and marketed out there. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Cordero. Chair Waters.
Thank you so much. Hey, Director, don't you think it'd be helpful to include information on the property tax bill, or even better yet, on the assessment that goes out, warning people? I still have constituents who don't even know what residential A is. In fact, I had one situation last year where the constituent saw that it was residential A, and you may have even made it in red, but they didn't think anything of it. And when their bill went up 3 times, from I think 7,000 to 21,000, then the red flag came up. So you know that I've tried on numerous occasions to work with you and your department. I think I've introduced 3 different bills to try to solve this problem. I'm not sure a permitted interaction group would work. I'd prefer your department come up with a solution. Like I said, I've tried 3 different bills to figure this out and haven't. So I'm thinking an educational campaign is my last resort.
Thank you, Chair Waters. The educational campaign has been implemented, and it started early on during our administration. Also, I'd like to state that I still feel a permitted interaction group would work if it's more focused and if we include real property tax experts on the committee, because I think we haven't exhausted looking at maybe even downgrading residential A. I don't know if downgrading is the right, de-emphasizing Res A, and going, looking hard at a owner-occupied, non-owner-occupied model as opposed to a residential and residential A model. That may really help. We still can have a much higher tax for single-family units over a higher value amount, like $3 or $4 million. So there's I think still a lot of discussion that we can have to see if we can build consensus among council members to make a change.
Thank you. I do have to give your office credit because it's gotten a lot better with various senior fairs and things like that. But I still think, just a note on your property tax assessment that you are now residential A would be early enough to make a difference. But, if you're saying that the administration is open to changing from residential A to homeowner occupied versus homeowner not occupied, then perhaps a permitted interaction group might be useful. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Waters. Seeing no further questions. Councilmember Tolba, any questions? No? Okay. Director Kawana, I would like to just reiterate what Councilmember Tupola said, and maybe the other department heads can hear this as well, that obviously when an amendment was proposed to us, some of them were multiple, so not just one council member. So obviously there's a feel for a need to address something. So when the departments come up here, we are always, I know I personally always welcome your input, and we're willing to take your advice because you guys are experts in your field. However, that being said, it would be really helpful if we are not just told no or yes, decline, accept. We would like to hear your reasoning, which you shared, but also what are the departments doing to address the issues that we are stating that are connected to the amendments that have been proposed. That would be really helpful moving forward. I know this is the first hearing for the CD1, but I think I would, as a budget chair, really appreciate that. I think my colleagues would as well.
Okay, I take your advice and we'll work towards that. Thank you.
Thank you, and that's for all the departments. I think anybody who's coming up here and they have questions or concerns and they don't agree with what we're proposing, it's in there for a reason, so we would appreciate to see what are the departments doing to address the issue and what can we do working together. Thank you. Okay. Members, any further questions for BFS? If not, we'll move on to page 3. And we're going to take the next department, which is the Department of Corporation Counsel. Did I have it? Oh. And here, specific for the Ethics Commission, we have with us Acting Director Elmira Sang. Good morning, Executive Director.
Good morning, Budget Chair Okimoto, Vice Chair Nishimoto, and council members.
Sorry, let me just read the proposed amendment. Again, the proposed amendment is for adding funding for salaries, the amount of $35,766, and the recommendation is to accept but amend description to read, add funding for salaries for OC 1101X vacancy cutback with the amount of $35,766. Thank you, Acting Director.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councilmember Dos Santos Tam, for the proposed amendment.
Members, do we have any questions for Acting Executive Director? Okay, thank you so much. Moving on to the Department of the Prosecuting Attorney. We do have with us Prosecuting Attorney Steve I will go through each of the amendments and then we can discuss. So first, the proposed amendment was to add funding for salaries in the amount of $196,265 from the general funds And the recommendation was to accept but amend description to read, add funding for salaries for OC 1101X vacancy cutback in the amount of $196,265 from the, that's for administration, from the prosecution, activity. The proposed amendment is to add positions and funding for salaries, 10 positions of $2,043,439, and the recommendation is to accept the 10 positions in the amount of $2,043,439. From the Victim and Witness Assistance Program, the proposed amendment is to add funding for salaries of $102,494, and the recommendation is to accept but amend description to read, add funding for salaries for OC 1101X vacancy cutback in the amount of $102,494. I think that was it for the prosecuting attorneys. Good morning, Prosecutor.
Good morning. I'm Steve Alm, Honolulu prosecutor. I want to thank for Chair Okimoto, Vice Chair Nishimoto, Chair Waters, members of the committee. I want to thank you all for hearing us and supporting us in trying to improve public safety. And we appreciate what is being proposed here, and I see the total funding amount, and we appreciate what is being proposed right here. I would have one alternative, and that would be move the admin restoration to prosecution, move the victim witness assistance to prosecution, and make that the 20 positions instead of the 10, but leaving the same bottom line. Because we appreciate how difficult this is for you. Looking at giving us something means somebody else doesn't get something. So the bottom line would be the, as in yours, Chair Okimoto's, $2,342,188, but all in the prosecution section and with 20 permanent positions. We think we can make it work.
Okay, thank you, Prosecutor. Members, questions for Prosecuting Attorney? Okay, thank you. We will take that into account, provided the input that you have given us. I know that your ask was 20, and we did our best, but I'll look into what you have proposed, and we can meet offline if necessary.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, members, now moving on to pages 4 and 5. From the Department of Planning and Permitting, I see we have with us Director Takeuchi Apuna with us. I will be going through those 2 pages, and then we can turn it over for discussion. So the proposed amendment is to add one, for the administration, add 1 FTE and funding for salaries, add proviso at least 1 FTE and at least $89,800 out of salaries shall be appropriated for a planner 4 position to assist the Oahu Historic Preservation Commission. The amount, again, is $89,800. The recommendation is to accept that 1 position at the amount of $89,800. Also from administration, add a position and funding for salaries, add proviso at least $59,500 out of salaries shall be appropriated for an Office Assistant 3 position to support the Oahu Historic Preservation Commission for a position of 1 at $59,500. And the recommendation is to accept that amount in position as well as dollar amount for $59,500. For site development, proposed amendment, add funding for salaries, add proviso at least $240,000 out of current expenses for OC 1123 recruit and retention incentive for the implementation of an educational loan forgiveness program for up to 20 engineers within the Department of Planning and Permitting in the amount of $240,000. The recommendation is to accept but amend description to read, add funding for salaries, add proviso at least $240,000 out of salaries shall be appropriated for OC 1123 recruit and retention incentive for the implementation of an educational loan forgiveness program for up to 20 engineers with the amount of $240,000. In land use permits, the proposed amendment is to add funding for salaries, add proviso at least $109,200 out of salaries shall be appropriated for a position dedicated to agricultural planning. And the recommendation is to accept but amend description to read, add funding for salaries, add proviso, at least $109,200 out of salaries shall be appropriated for agricultural planning purposes. And at this time, we'd like to welcome Director Takeuchi Apuna from the Department of DPP.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, Vice Chair, members of the council. We very much appreciate these proposed adds from Councilmember Kia Aina. The two positions for Oahu Historic Preservation Commission will be very helpful with regard to cultural and historical preservation and our ability to move faster through permitting. And then for the ag planner, that will be a very important role going forward to oversee a lot of the agricultural zoned areas and the issues that are involved there. And then for the extra funding for engineers, in order for us to fill and retain engineers that work on building permits. And I would just like to add for that specific ad, we would like to see that it be moved from site development, the activity, to building division, because the engineers that we would like to, that we're having challenges in hiring is under the building division where we do the commercial building permit review. And with that, I'm available for any questions.
Thank you, Director. We'll start the questions with Councilmember Kia Aina. These were her amendments.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I wanted to thank you for accepting these amendments. For my colleagues, the historic preservation positions, they are actually contracted at the moment. And as you know, we helped to establish the Oahu Historic Preservation Commission, and they have been doing a very good job. And in light of the fact that we have a good chance of a charter amendment moving through the process that would add historic preservation to the Clean Water Natural Lands Fund as an authorized expenditure. I just am trying to say that anything we could do to strengthen the capacity at DPP with regard to historic preservation so that they could collaborate with the DLNR State Historic Preservation Development Division is good for all of us. With regard to the loan forgiveness program, colleagues, this was an issue that came up with the state legislature speed task force with which the director and myself are on. They felt that workforce development is a top priority for dealing with the backlog that we are currently facing. The loan forgiveness program is something that I had proposed. I am a beneficiary of a loan forgiveness program, and I think it's a little different from just giving out educational scholarships. It's another tool to incentivize people to come and work for the city, specifically for the backlog, right? So that we could level the playing field. Funding is not a problem. It is, bodies, human bodies. I do know that it was flagged for me that there might be a touch with collective bargaining as an issue, but I have contacted the head of HGA and to let him know how important this is. We are viewing this as a pre-employment agreement, which doesn't touch collective bargaining. With regard to retention of your engineers, we can work on that in the long term. I think everybody could support engineers now. And then, of course, lastly, we have the city's agricultural task force up and running. And I know that they're in the throes of filling the position that was authorized last year. So this is just continuing that. Anyway, thank you. Thank you for your support.
Thank you, Councilmember Kia Aina. Members, any further questions or discussion for DPP? Okay, thank you, Director. Members, moving now on to page 6, as well as page 12. We're going to take this by department. For general government and highways and streets, we have from the Department of Facility and Maintenance, there he is, Director Gene Albano. And again, members, this will be on pages 6 and 12 for DFM. So let me start. Aloha, good morning, Director. I'm just going to read the quick amendments and then we'll turn it over to you as well as to the members for questions. For project and construction management, the proposed amendment is to reduce current expenses by $150,000. The recommendation is to accept, but amend description to read, reduce funding for current expenses for, I'm so sorry, I was in the wrong one. Let me go back, Director. For DFM, public building and electrical maintenance, the proposed amendment is to add funding for current expenses, add proviso at least $25,000 out of current expenses shall be appropriated for cattle gate installations at Waianae Neighborhood Community Center in the amount of $25,000. The recommendation is to accept that amount of $25,000. And then on page 12, as well as from DFM, regarding road maintenance, the proposed amendment is to add funding for current expenses, add proviso at least $1 million out of current expenses shall be appropriated for emergency and routine maintenance and repair of streams, channels, and ditches within the Alawai watershed for the amount of $1 million, and the recommendation is to accept it for the amount of $1 million. And then in road maintenance as well, the proposed amendment is to add funding for equipment with the added proviso of at least $750,000 out of equipment shall be appropriated for a long-reach excavator to expedite maintenance of city-owned streams. And the amount is $750,000. The recommendation is to accept, but move to Bill 23, 2026, CD1 in the Executive Capital Budget and Program. And I'd like to welcome with us again Director Albano.
Good morning, Budget Chair Okimoto, Budget Vice Chair Nishimoto, Council Members Gene Albano, Director of Department of Facility Maintenance. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on these three ads. With respect to the additional ad of $25,000 for the gate, thank you, Council Member Tupola. I've discussed it with our PBM division. We will make that a priority under our current budget. We respectfully decline that ad. With respect to the $1 million ad for current expenses by Vice Chair Nishimoto, we respectfully decline. There is issues with respect to the ability to contract services that our department does. However, we understand that the intent of that ad and know that in light of the storms that have occurred, we believe that adjustments to the budget will be addressed accordingly anyway with respect to cleaning of your streams for this particular storm. Lastly, Councilmember Tupola, thank you so much for the opportunity for a third long-reach excavator. However, similarly, at this time, we likely will require priority on other equipment prior to obtaining our long-reach excavator. So thank you, and we again respectfully decline these three budget ads. And I'm happy to take any
Thank you, Director Kawano. Members, I'll turn it over to you for questions. Any questions from the respective council members? Nope. Council Chair Waters.
Thank you. Good morning, Director.
Good morning.
With regard to stream maintenance, you said that you're gonna, or budget changes are in the works. Can you be more specific?
We anticipate that the administration will be adjusting budgets, whether it's operating or CAP, to address any of the damages that have occurred in the streams. So therefore, I would defer to wait to see how we're going to address how we are going to maintain our streams. We understand that the streams currently have scoured, there's erosion, and some of that maintenance will may become CIP. And then until we are able to assess the damages of the city streams or city waterways, we just don't know yet how best to use budget moving forward for fiscal year 27.
You know that I've been a big advocate and fighting for stream maintenance for years now, and I appreciate the work that you've done on Wailupe Stream. But in the preliminary research that I'm doing, we have 57 streams on the island, 57. And, you know, I think it was Sean Quinlan, the majority leader in the State House, was talking about how the city and state has to work together. And just looking at when I used to represent Waimanalo in the stream, there'd be city, state, private, city, state, and one stream would be jumbled up. But at this point, with what happened across the state, I think we should put that aside and just start cleaning them all. But how do we do that? Is that going to come from your budget? Within your budget, you're going to move money around? Is that going to be what, and we'll probably talk about this tomorrow with the managing director, is that where the rainy day fund is going to be used? Or shall we, from the council, to me, $1 million is not enough, right? It's not enough. But can you answer this for me? How many staff do you currently have that do stream cleaning?
I don't know that off of my top of my head, but it's roughly probably 100 to 200 staff, crew members that are maintaining streams, sidewalks, whatnot.
Right. I mean, you're including sidewalks, but my understanding is there's 5. There's 5 that are specifically assigned to cleaning streams.
I would argue that, or I would. There are more than 5 people cleaning streams. If staff members, crew members, they're cleaning streams. So I will, if you want a specific number, I can get back to you on that.
No, I think it's more important to figure out exactly what the administration plans to do with regard to stream cleaning going forward in light of the flooding that just happened. Don't worry about the position question. I do think that's important, though, figuring out how we're going to pay for this.
Understood, Chair.
Thank you, Director. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair Waters. I'll do Committee Vice Chair Nishimoto and then Councilmember Tupola.
Thank you. Thank you, Director. I just wanted to clarify what you said so I understand it completely. So when you talked about they're going to move money in for...
Well, I anticipate, yeah.
Okay, so you've been told they're going to move money?
Yes.
Okay, and this is for the current situation, the storms we had the past few weeks, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so this $1 million is for routine maintenance and repair of the stream. So I think we're talking about 2 different things here, correct?
If that's the case, appreciate the intention. However, it goes back to my premise in that some of this work cannot be outsourced with the $1 million simply because that is work that our staff does. So there is a conflict of interest. We are then privatizing that work that our staff does.
Can you use the $1 million to hire more staff?
Yes.
So
that would be
I'm a little confused about why you would not want extra help for the streams when, and I put in this amendment before this storm. We had to turn in these amendments, a couple weeks ago. So this is something I've heard from my community that we need even prior to the storms. So if you could use this $1 million to hire more people, wouldn't that help the situation for you?
Absolutely. But again, we have to work with our budget, and we are one city.
Your budget is given to you by us. I mean,
that is correct.
We create your budget. So, but I'm just a little baffled.
I will say also that having been with the city now for almost 3 years, with budget, we appreciate it, but we also want to be mindful of the ability to hire in a timely manner. So I know the council members also have a concern with lapsing funds, and so with the current reduction of staff that salaries that we were given by the administration, we feel comfortable with that reduction for fiscal year 27, and we can certainly entertain the additional 1 million for additional staff if it is needed next year. So we are currently continuing our effort to hire, but appreciate that we have the ability, but I want to be practical in the ability to hire in a timely manner as well.
Okay, you and I, we want the same thing.
Yes.
Right? We're working toward the same goal. I see this as trying to help you, and I don't quite understand that answer you just gave, but we're trying to help you get more staff
Understood.
to clean out the streams.
Understood.
So that possibly what happened last week won't happen again. And this is something I've heard from my district for 2 years now. That's why I put this in even before the storms. So I'm trying to help you get more staff.
Let me respond to you with respect to the flood. Our infrastructure was never intended to be able to handle the intense flow that occurred for the last 2 weeks.
Okay.
So if we're thinking of the ability to avoid this flood, then it's a bigger conversation, because we then have to look at infrastructure, and that is a topic that we have to discuss and determine how do we fund infrastructure?
I agree.
How do we assess infrastructure?
But
and we
would,
have to. I'm sorry, Councilmember.
You would agree with me that if you had more crew and did more maintenance, we would certainly mitigate that at least a little. Correct?
Understood. So it's a balance. At the end of the day, it's a balance, and we appreciate the funding, and we can discuss it further.
I got you. Now let me bring up what you brought up in your your response to this about the current situation for the flood and how they're going to move money in to help you. Where is that money coming from?
It's probably the rainy day fund. But I do not want to speak on behalf of the administration. So I am surmising how we are going to address the damages moving forward, and I would respectfully ask that you listen to what MD has to say tomorrow.
Okay. And let me end by saying this. I think you guys have done the best job you can, or you've tried to do the best job you can. I'm just trying to help you
Understand,
do a better job.
Councilmember Nishimoto.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Committee Vice Chair Nishimoto. Councilmember Tupola.
Thank you so much. Aloha, Director. Thanks for being here. Always, always, always appreciate DFM. I cannot say, without you guys' help this past week, I would have been in a tight spot. You know, your guys were out with me for 3 days pumping water, 3 days straight. So thank you. Thank you for sending me all your supplies, despite the fact that there might have been other areas that needed it. I think just the small help you gave in conjunction with HECO, with DOT, with all the other guys, it made a difference. So I just want to make sure you know that I'm grateful.
I appreciate it. And that goes to Chair's point, where it's very jurisdictional, and if there was ability to just take care of things, it would get done sooner. But understand the premise of respecting jurisdiction.
Yeah, I do a lot of very creative begging, and it works. So I'm grateful for what you did send my way. Thank you. I just want to say that this budget is probably going to be done in May or June, and I want to say that we should leave in that gate. I'm saying this because I had asked for that gate in the past budget, and it didn't happen. Now, $25,000 is not a lot. But what happens is, if I see a gate go up at the Waianae Convenience Center, boom, let's cut it out of the budget. But if I don't, then we're going to have to leave it in, because I am not of the confidence that the gate is going to birth itself without any funding. So I will wait. If we need to take it out, but I might reinsert it at the end. It's not a big deal, but it's also a very small ask that I've been doing for a very long time, trying to get other community donations to make that DMV look good, so we have less chronics, less, vandalism, less all kinds of things. So it's a very small ask, And so I'm just gonna tell you that's my direction. You don't have to like agree or disagree with me. That's the direction I'm gonna go.
Thank you,
Then for the
Councilmember.
long reach excavator, this is the thing that cleans our streams. So back to the stream cleaning. We got a new one, just so you know, we have a new one. I'm worried about the old one going kaput. So if we are not prepared, like what Councilmember Nishimoto said, then we are in a bad spot. So I will just leave that up to you. I'm just saying, I know that we have them that work, but the oldest one may be ready to retire. And so we got to be mindful of that. And I know you guys need other equipment. I mean, honestly, if DFM had all the right equipment, you guys would be golden. You know what I mean? Like DFM is the place that makes a difference in the city. And I know you guys are told when you come in here to just decline everything that we put in here. I get it. You guys are trying to balance the whole budget. But at the end of the day, we see all the needs meet the ground. And so if you could, let us guide you a little bit, because I think the stream cleaning thing can happen in multiple ways. Long reach excavator, maybe some positions, whatever budget chair feels or we all feel together. But I know you guys will get it done no matter what happens at the end of this budget, but that's just my heart for it, is that I don't want us to be caught when we don't have the equipment we need. That was the #1 difference maker, was the right equipment on the street. Because people were showing up with like little tiny pumps. I was like, oh, that's not gonna do anything. Thank you, please go back home. The only people that have the kind of equipment we needed was you guys in DOT. So I'm just saying we have to keep our equipment at the top, part of our mindset, because even if we had 5 helping hands, they can't dig out the sand from the river. We need the equipment. So again, I think that we're going the right way with like the river maintenance. So whatever happens, whether it's bodies or the long reach excavator, I need to emphasize that that's the help we needed. You guys came through, and we're just trying to make sure that every time something happens, you guys always have stuff that works. So thank you, Director.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councilmember Tupola. Chair Waters, followed by Councilmember Cordero.
Thank you so much. Hey, just had a thought. So we had an old excavator that we couldn't get replacement parts for, correct? So we got a new excavator. In the budget, there's money for a second excavator that will work. Is that correct? In the CIP budget.
Can you clarify, Chair?
So I'll just get right to the point. This $1 million that Councilmember Nishimoto put in, couldn't we use that cash to buy a new excavator? 2 is better than 1 because you could do double the work.
Well, Councilmember Tupola has an ad for that excavator.
In cash? In CIP, but cash, you can buy it faster. And from what we know about CIP, we put about $1 billion in CIP, but every year the city only floats $500 million. So we don't know if your money that's in the budget and the CIP will make the cut. This way, you got cash. Cash is king. Just a thought. You don't have to respond.
Appreciate it.
Members, just a thought. Keep it in. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Chair Waters. Councilmember Cordero.
Thank you, Chair. I do want to note that even though it's with the CIP, we've had this long battle between kind of exactly what Chair Waters mentioned. I was going to mention that we have the mobile crane that's added, as well as the excavator in one project. And we do want to see you do not just the +1, but, +2, right?
And that was discussed. And so we'll work with the administration to see how potentially this can be added.
So for the
Is that okay
+1,
as an
would you be
answer?
able to explain, Director, the +1 in your equipment?
+1, in essence, is the ability to rotate equipment and have it last longer. So the ability to have +1, in this case, 3 excavators would allow us to have 1 that would be spare, per se, and then rotate it amongst the 3. So we could rest the oldest one, use when we get the 3rd excavator, then to utilize that and extend the life of the oldest one. So that is the ability to have redundancy for critical equipment.
I understand. And so for all the different yards, do they share the +1, or if this
That is
approved,
how
the
our
+2?
operations work. All the yards share heavy equipment. And wherever it is required, it is deployed to that.
And how many
location.
yards are there, though? 4?
Pardon, 3, let's see. Kaneohe, Laie, Kailua, Honolulu, Kapolei,
Pro City?
Waialua, and Pro City. So 7.
Okay, 7. And then plus
6,
3.
7.
Oh,
Only
no,
joke, only joke.
director. Okay. Okay, so with that, I like that, by the way, that was good. But 3, a plus 2, so 1 that you're utilizing, then if we accept this, including the mobile crane, it'll be a plus 2 for the long reach excavator and a mobile crane as well, right? And then shared among 7
The
yards.
mobile crane is
and
used for
57
other
streams.
purposes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then-
As we discussed at our budget hearing.
Okay.
Yeah.
And has the department been able to achieve receiving equipment through capital improvement projects?
Yes, we have. Yeah.
You have?
We've made very good strides in terms of
You've been
being
able to
to
get-
get equipment. Yes.
Through
Absolutely.
capital improvement project, but money, funds.
Through CIP funding, depending on the service life of the equipment as well as the actual
Okay, Director,
cost.
fight like heck, fight like hell to get that from the capital improvement project funding, okay? Thank you. I do also have another question. Sorry, I didn't mean to. And my next question is, it's not accepted, but I was wondering through your street sign and street sign maintenance, I know that we've upgraded to a +1 for our equipment. We've also upgraded for our street signs team to be 3 people, 5 people, compared to the 1 person that we used to have. So we are so upgrading up in DFM here. But there's so many street signs that I've been going through. Of course, we travel. It's an island, and the signs are all still. I don't know where I'm going sometimes. So, what's the update on that?
We continue to see where it's needed the most, and then
Right.
chipping away at our backlog. And often, if there is awareness from DFM where we need signs to be replaced due to public health and safety, then we will make those a priority and adjust as needed.
Okay, I appreciate it, and I thank you and your team and your department. You've made strides to really do not just a +1 for all your equipment, but really staffing up the teams in all the different divisions in your department. I really appreciate that, and that's such a huge help for all of our districts. Thank you, Director Albano.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Cordero. Members, any further questions for Director Albano? Any further discussion? I want to mahalo you guys as well. I know that the city has been working really hard around the clock to help with the effects of the after effects of the storm and the flooding. So thank you to you and your team. At this time, Director, we will take into consideration, as we are, all of the department's responses to our amendments. But I think it's really important, especially as members have expressed that even prior to you and I probably being in this seat, that they've had concerns in their districts respectively. So we want to not just disregard the asks, because it's easy to say, it's nice to say that we're going to do it, but if the concerns have been for a long period of time, then we want to be able to address them. So, but I will again take into account your discussion today. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
And again, Councilmember Nishimura, appreciate it.
Thank you. Members, moving on to the next department on page 6, which is the Department of Design and Construction. For the project and construction management, the proposed amendment is to reduce current expenses by $150,000, and the recommendation is to accept but amend description to read, reduce funding for current expenses for OC 3006, other professional services in the amount of $150,000. And with us today, we have from the department, Director Haku Millis. Thank you for being here, Director.
Good morning, Budget Chair Okimoto, honorable council members. I'm Haku Millis. I'm the Director for Department of Design and Construction. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here and provide response for this proposed amendment. We would like to request full restoration of $150,000 for current expenses. Typically, this fund is to support various moves, unanticipated moves modular furniture, whether it's relocation or purchase of modular furniture, those kinds of things to support our sister agencies when things come up. Happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. Members, questions for the Director? Chair Waters.
Thank you. Appreciate your request, but pivoting just for a second, large-scale stream cleaning. Does DFM do it all, or does DDC do some of it? Like I mentioned, there's 57 streams island-wide.
Thank you for the question. So the stream cleaning specifically is 100% done by DFM. Typically for us, if there is significant erosion or we need to do some kind of stream hardening or rebuilding of walls or revetments or things like that, that's when it becomes a CIP project and turned over to DDC to execute.
Okay, are you aware of any projects dealing with streams currently on your desk?
So we do have some projects. The names of them off the top of my head I don't have, but the ones that are in the current budget, if that's what you're asking for 27, I think there's only one that is moved towards construction in 27, but we have projects that are underway right now, and I can provide the list.
Okay, is it in your bubble chart? I can just look at that.
Yes, it would be in the bubble chart.
Okay, yeah, don't need to get back to me. I can look it up. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair Waters. Members, any further discussion or questions for Director of DDC? No? Welcome and congratulations again to the new babies. Hopefully
Thank you.
everyone's doing well.
Thank you. Yes, they're doing great, as is Ash. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, we will now move on to the beginning of page 7 through page 11 for public safety, the Honolulu Police Department. Oh, is that mine? Yeah, here it is. Okay. Starting with the first item from the Office of the Chief of Police, the proposed amendment is to add funding for salaries. Add proviso at least $65,000 out of salaries shall be appropriated to provide a payment of $5,000 as part of a 5-year retention incentive program to make annual payments to uniformed officers and civilian personnel with 25 or more years of service to encourage delayed retirement and retain institutional knowledge in the amount of $65,000, and the recommendation is to accept it at the amount of $65,000. For patrol, the proposed amendment is to add funding for salaries. Add proviso at least $995,000 out of salaries shall be appropriated to provide a payment of $5,000 as part of a 5-year retention incentive program to make annual payments to uniformed officers and civilian personnel with 25 or more years of service to encourage delayed retirement and retain institutional knowledge in the amount of $995,000. The recommendation is to accept it in the amount of $995,000. On page 8, under patrol, add funding for current expenses. Add proviso at least $280,000 out of current expenses shall be appropriated to expand the community policing team in all 8 patrol districts in the amount of $280,000. The recommendation is to accept it in the amount of $280,000. Also for patrol, add funding for current expenses. Add proviso at least $80,000 out of current expenses shall be appropriated for a recruitment referral bonus program to provide payments of up to $2,000 to employees who refer candidates who are subsequently hired and complete early service milestones in the amount of $80,000. The recommendation is to accept it for $80,000. Under patrol, proposed amendment, add equipment funds in the amount of $64,000. The recommendation is to accept, but amend description to read, add funding for equipment, add proviso at least $64,000 out of equipment shall be appropriated for additional security cameras for the overt video monitoring pilot program authorized by Resolution 24-64CD1 in the amount of $64,000. On page 9, for special field operations, proposed amendment, add funding for salaries, add proviso at least $100,000 out of salaries shall be appropriated to provide a payment of $5,000 as part of a 5-year retention incentive program to make annual payments to uniformed officers and civilian personnel with 25 or more years of service to encourage delayed retirement and retain institutional knowledge in the amount of $100,000. The recommendation is to accept it in the amount of $100,000. Under investigations, The proposed amendment is to add funding for salaries, add proviso at least $275,000 out of salaries shall be appropriated to provide a payment of $5,000 as part of a 5-year retention incentive program to make annual payments to uniformed officers and civilian personnel with 25 or more years of service to encourage delayed retirement and retain institutional knowledge in the amount of $275,000. The recommendation is to accept it in the amount of $275,000. On page 10 at the top, under support services, the proposed amendment is to add funding for salaries, add proviso at least $255,000 out of salaries shall be appropriated to provide a payment of $5,000 as part of a 5-year retention incentive program to make annual payments to uniformed officers and civilian personnel with 25 or more years of service to encourage delayed retirement and retain institutional knowledge in the amount of $255,000. The recommendation is to accept it in the amount of $255,000. Under support services, the proposed amendment is to add funding for salaries, add proviso, at least $480,000 out of salaries shall be appropriated for a civilian employee parking stipend of up to $200 per month in the proposed amount of $480,000. The recommendation is to accept it in the amount of $480,000. And on page 11, under administrative services, the proposed amendment is to add funding for salaries, add proviso, at least $115,000 out of salaries shall be appropriated to provide a payment of $5,000 as part of a 5-year retention incentive program to make annual payments to uniformed officers and civilian personnel with 25 or more years of service to encourage delayed retirement and retain institutional knowledge in the proposed amount of $115,000. The recommendation is to accept it in the $115,000 amount. And finally, under administrative services, to reduce funding for salaries, and the recommendation is to accept it in the amount of $2,365,000. And thank you very much. And with us today, we have from the Department of, from the HPD, Major Ryan Hironaka. Thank you for being here, Major.
Okay. Good morning, Budget Chair Okimoto, Budget Vice Chair Nishimoto, Chair Waters, and Vice Chair Tupola. I'm just going to reiterate from our HPD's prior responses to the amendments. Number one, the department respectfully opposes any reductions to our salaries beyond what was proposed in the mayor's budget. The second is the department respectfully opposes the creation of any provisos regarding the funds. Now, a lot of the provisos are pertaining to recruitment, retention initiatives. The department is going to continue with those initiatives and explore those options. The department is just asking that no provisos be attached. And one reason is it's very inflexible, and we believe it's going to cause funds to lapse in our budget. And third, we appreciate the added funding, but we believe that we respectfully decline any additional funding that was added in the budget. We believe that we can continue operations with the funding that we currently have. And with that, I'll be open to any questions.
Thank you, Major Hironaka. Members, questions? Councilmember Tupola.
Thank you. Aloha, Major. Thank you for being here. I do appreciate that you're able to read the statement that you needed to today, but I know that it's very important for us to carry out some of these initiatives that we discussed. Now, I'm going to say a few things, and you don't need to respond. This is for the universe. There are a lot of funds lapsing already. So every year, because of the vacancies, right? Somewhere around 46 million, somewhere. Maybe less, maybe more. Sometimes it depends. A few years ago it was 50 million, sometimes it's 37 million. But because of the vacancies, we have lapses. And then when we ask questions in the hearing, then we're told that some of it's used for overtime, some of it's used for this, some of it's used for that. And then we get a lot of resos that transfer funds in the millions. Transfer it here, transfer it there. The hard part about doing the budget that way is that every year, we're not really sure exactly how much each area of the HPD budget was spent because we had to transfer at the last minute to try to spend down all the funds. So we're trying to get to a point where we're more responsible about the budget, where we can account for line items that went to certain areas so that if we need to have that same line item repeat because we support what it did the previous year, we know what it was spent for, and we know that it made a difference. So that's one of the reasons why we want there, and I did already speak to multiple people in the HPD administration, why we want there to be some delineation of where some of these funds are going, even if it already exists there. I hear what you're saying, though, about flexibility. So flexibility is important, but on our end, accountability is very important. We have to account for how much overtime, how much did we put towards it, what was the ROI on the overtime, did we apart that? And then moreover, once we give that overtime, some of the districts are saying, oh, we weren't allowed to use it, or we were denied overtime. We don't know any of those things. So all we can do is just make sure we have a line item that says overtime, we're aware of it. So I'm just gonna go through the ones since the majority of these are mine. So each of these areas, the reason why they're in multiple different places as far as the retention bonus for current officers is because many of the officers that would qualify for this are in different divisions. They're not just in patrol. They're all over different HPD divisions, and they've been with Honolulu Police for many years. And I do think that for many officers, this current, what would you call it, recruitment bonus for all the incoming officers, it's doing what it needs to do, but I do think that every time we get in 100-something officers, then we have that same amount leave, right, retire. So we have to see what we can do on the retention side. There is no recruitment without retention. So I'm not gonna go through each line because multiple of these lines have the same paragraph and all of that has to do with retention. On page 8, where it says that 80,000 should be appropriated for referral bonuses. In the task force, HPD told us that the highest and most qualified and I guess long-lasting recruits we had were all referred from other officers. So that's like our best place that we should get referrals from, not from 24-hour fitness, not from the high schools, not from other places. We have to rely on our police force because you guys are building a family. You're building a place where people want to stay and want to work. So that's what that one is about. I also added in there in the civilian parking. This is something small, but if we're having a deficit in dispatchers, then we need to be able to help them. They really don't make that much money, and $480,000 so that we can pay for the parking for the dispatchers is the most minimal thing we can do. HGEA already did the pay differential. So now for some of the dispatchers, they're able to access that for overtime. But we all agreed that this parking stipend wouldn't be a lot and that it would make a big difference. So when you see this reduction of salaries at the bottom, that is because all of the things that I did add up to that amount. $2 million is not a lot. HPD has possibly the most flexibility of lapsed funds than any other department in the city. So to ask for $2 million to be put into these areas to ensure that it gets done, not to be verbally told that it's going to get done, but to ensure that that funding is going towards those things, because retention, the parking stipend, referral bonus, I think that's the most minimal things we can do that will greatly increase our ability to retain officers and to decrease the vacancies. So I know that you're here on behalf of the administration, and I don't have any critique on anything that you said, but I'm just saying that those are the things that I feel like we spoke on, we all agreed, including the HPD officers that were on the task force with me. It's something that I need to hold myself accountable to, because we spent weeks and weeks determining that these are the things that are going to help us decrease vacancies. We can't have a task force and then not fund any of the initiatives, because then we've just wasted our time. So we're going to just fund a few of them to make sure that we can see some of the differences. And we actually chose them based upon some of the recommendations from HPD as well as recommendations from the Police Commission. So it wasn't ones that I chose. It was ones that people read the report and said, hey, these are the best ones that we think would make a difference right away. So thank you guys so much for the service you provide. And thank you for the support that we're trying to give to your department so that you guys can continue to succeed, as well as all the officers that are currently working doing a lot of special duty, and of course, doing community work. We appreciate all of you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Vice Chair Tupola. Councilmember Cordero.
Thank you, Chair Okimoto, and thank you very much for accepting the support for community policing. So, Major Hironaka, I was just wondering about the response for the lapse in FY25. You have about 50 plus million in lapses. I know that Councilmember Tupola was able to highlight a lot of the different efforts that we want to support within the department, but I would like to know the efforts to spend down the funding that HPD lapses year after year. It can range from 7 to 21 to even 30% per division. And we just want to be able to see whether it be equipment or salaries that is expended fully, because we budget every year, year by year. So would you be able to have a response to that?
Sorry about that. Just to clarify, fiscal year 24, that was when our lapse was near $50 million. And I just want to say that was kind of like an outlier. So last year for fiscal year 25, our lapse was approximately $23 million, which was about 6% or so. This year, it's going to continue downward, and we expect our lapse to be even lower. So consistently, it's going lower every year. And with the amount budget in the mayor's budget for this year, with the reductions, we expect it's going to continue that trend.
Thank you, Major, for that clarification, and I stand corrected on which fiscal year had the increase. So what are those steps to then actively spend down and not see that type of lapse moving forward? Like, what are those steps?
Well, for the salaries, it depends on the element commanders, on the initiatives and how they use their staffing. And there's vacancies, so that naturally to fill the vacancy comes from overtime. So that's going to bring down the salaries. But in the finance division, we're primarily responsible for the procurement services, which pertains to the category B, category C. So with the category B, the current expenses, we monitor it to make sure that if there's funds left over, that we can repurpose it to other items. And we look ahead into future quarters, possibly a future year, to get projects ahead in the fiscal years. And we don't want, one of the things that causes lapses is the procurement process. Sometimes they don't get carried out in the fiscal year, so the funds allotted for the project, they'll end up lapsing. So we made sure that a lot of our big projects were started very early this fiscal year, and most of them were all completed by the second quarter.
Thank you for that, and I know that procurement is a long journey that will that is being rectified, not just in your department, but even budget and fiscal services too. So thank you for that response. I look forward to seeing how you'll be moving things throughout your budget, and then how you'll be able to change that in the future budget years. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councilmember Cordero. Members, any further questions for HPD? Okay. Thank you so much for being here, Major Hironaka.
Thank you for your time.
Okay. Members, we'll now move on to page 11, as well as pages 18 and 19 for highways and streets and utilities and other enterprises for the Department of Transportation Services. And as Director Morton is coming to the podium, starting from page 11 for transportation engineering, the proposed amendment is to add current expense funds for crosswalk safety in school zones for $10,000. The recommendation is to accept, but amend description to read, add funding for current expenses, add proviso, at least $10,000 out of current expenses shall be appropriated for safety improvements at the Nenue Place crosswalk for $10,000. And then on pages 18 and the top of 19, so bottom of page 18, for DTS under administration, the proposed amendment is to add funding for current expenses, add proviso at least $50,000 out of current expenses shall be appropriated for quick build improvements at the crosswalk located at Kamehameha Highway at the corner of Pahia Road and Kaneohe in the proposed amount of $50,000. The recommendation is to accept that proposed amendment for $50,000. And at the top of page 19, both under administration, the proposed amendments are to add funding for current expenses and, add proviso at least $500,000 out of current expenses shall be appropriated for the implementation of the Lanikai Transportation Management Plan in the proposed amount of $500,000. The recommendation is to accept it in the amount of $500,000. And also to add funding for current expenses, add proviso at least $500,000 out of current expenses shall be appropriated for speed bumps on Kaha Street and Kaipi'i Street and Kailua and Laumilo Street and Waimanalo for the proposed amount of $500,000. The recommendation is to accept it for the proposed amount of $500,000. And with us, thank you again for being with us, Director Roger Morton from DTS.
Thank you, Chair Okimoto, Vice Chair Nishimoto. Roger Morton from the Department of Transportation Services. Obviously, as my fellow directors have come up, this is a very tough budget year for everybody. And I'll make comments on each of the items that you had brought up. The first one was $10,000 for safety improvements at the Neo Street. I think that's Holy Nativity Church School. I think we can not accept this and still make those safety improvements. We're happy to work with Chair Waters and others to do it. I do know that the roadway is a narrow roadway. It has a 15-mile-an-hour speed zone already. It has several speed bumps in the roadway. I know that there's private video surveillance from the school that has put private video surveillance, but we're happy to work with the council member to see what we can do to improve the road there. I know that it is the entrance to Aina Haina Shopping Center. We do get a lot of traffic of people just cutting through there, and I know the school is very concerned. Happy to work with council on just doing that without the need of adding additional money to it. On page 18, the proposal to do $50,000 of quick build improvements. I'd like to defer this to, as you know, that we have adequate funding, especially for quick builds. We'd like to talk to our representative, I think it's Council Member Kia Aina, to see what we can do, how we can integrate that into one of our existing programs. On page 19, the proposal for the $500,000 for the Lanikai transportation plan. Our approach on that is going to be to, first of all, sign the Mokulua Street to make it all no parking, and then we will evaluate whether or not that solves the problem or whether additional work is done. I think the $500,000 is for basically paving on some of the side streets so we can have parking there. And I think that we could, we'd like to first of all try this idea that was hatched at the neighborhood board. We'd like to go back to the neighborhood board, make the proposal. The objective is to make sure that everybody in Lanikai can get out without people waiting, all the visitors waiting for parking spots. And we think that just signing the one side might be an option that might work and solve that problem without having to do more than that. The next one was $500,000 for speed humps on Kaha Street, several streets. I think that we have a pretty robust speed hump, raised crosswalk, speed table program going on now. A lot of it is done with the support of the State Department of Transportation, and respectfully, we'd like to try to work that into our program there as well. We do spend a lot of time in discussions with council members trying to elicit projects, and we make a good faith effort to try to put them into a regular program, and that's kind of where I would stand on those ones right now.
Thank you, Director Morton. Members, questions for the director? Councilmember Kia Aina.
No questions, but I just need to say something. With regard to the provisions relating to my district, I would like to keep these amendments in, Chair, so thank you for accepting them. With regard to Pahia Road, I've been here, this is my 6th year. There's only 2 roads that a community has asked separate from Kamehameha Highway, which is ongoing. That's Pahia Road, the dangerous situation including for people who are walking there, as well as Kea'ahala Road. So no, I want to keep that in because the longer-term fix, I was told, there is no money until you secure the federal funding, so I need a quick fix. So I want to keep that in. With regard to the Lanikai Transportation Management Plan, no, that was not what was voted on at the last Kailua Neighborhood Board. What was voted on was that they did not want to implement the ban on the parking loop immediately. They wanted it to be done holistically, and that included bringing the side streets up to code so that we could have set hours. So this is not step 1, step 2. So it's not like we're just going to ban it and not have the money available. So that is necessary. And with regard to the other provisions, just based on my experience here, I'm finding that after we go through the petition process for our communities and fight for speed mitigation measures, there is no funding available. And if I just want to say, when you look at the totality of my budget request, it was quite minuscule because I understand how tight the budget is. So I appreciate your comments, but I ask that all of my provisions relating to my district remain in the budget. Thank you.
Thank you for Leader Kia Aina. Members, any further questions or discussion at this time for DTS Director Morton? Thank you, Director Morton. Members, we'll now go back to page 13 and proceed with the Department of Human Services from the Department of Housing and Land Management. So as Director Ajay is coming up, I will read at the top of page 13, for our Department of Housing and Land Management under administration, the proposed amendment is to add current expense funds, and the recommendation is to accept, but amend description to read, add funding for current expenses, add proviso, at least $4 million out of current expenses shall be appropriated to purchase the Queen Theater in Kaimuki, TMK 3-3-006:039. This amendment was moved from DES Auditoriums, see page 17 of this worksheet, in the amount of $4 million. And with this, we'd like to welcome again Director Ajay from DHLM.
Aloha, Budget Chair Akimoto and Vice Chair Nishimoto. With respect to the proposed amendment to the budget, $4 million is roughly half of our operating budget, so I'm not quite sure if that's a mistake or if that's something that we need to kind of look at, because I don't know how it can operate without operating funds. The administration has looked at the potential acquisition of the Queen's Theater intensely for quite some time. And unfortunately, the sellers of that property have not been amenable to a cooperative foreclosure on that asset. So our department and the administration evaluates property acquisitions based on an identified public purpose, funding availability, and departmental capacity. Additional acquisitions are reviewed through our normal acquisition planning and budgeting process. So for this particular asset, it's a tight spot. It's got, we know it has environmental conditions, asbestos, lead contamination, and also it's a very tricky parking area because there's just no parking available to it. We appreciate and respect the suggestion that the city acquire that asset. We know that it's been in the public domain for a long time, and it's not a great asset to look at in that community. Unfortunately, the city doesn't have the ability to foreclose because of blight. But we're happy to continue to work on that asset as we have been in the past. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Ajay. Chair Waters, I know this is in your district.
Yeah, thank you so much. the idea really would be that the city acquire the property and turn it over to a nonprofit who would then raise the money to refurbish the theater. It's been sitting vacant for almost 50 years, and it's really, really a gem that the community would and could enjoy once it's refurbished. The Palace Theater in Hilo was really the same situation, and working through the city and county and the state, the government acquired it. Now it's actually turning a profit. I'm open to a friendly amendment because I was speaking to House of Representatives Jackson Sayama, who also represents the area, and perhaps partnering with him, where we each put in $2 million. Where we got the $4 million from was the tax assessed value was 3.2, and based on a conversation that we had during the budget briefings with ENV, where they said they just add 25%. So that's what I did. I added 25%. But, you know, one of the things that working with Councilmember Cordero on, we were trying to get $1 million in THLM to build housing near the rail station in Councilmember Cordero's district. So may I propose we lower this down to $2 million and take the $2 million and give it to Radiant Cordero?
Chair, I will gladly take that recommendation and we can further discuss it. But thank you for, I know that both of you have that in your amendments, but thank you. And we can proceed with that. We can consider that moving forward to.
Yeah, we could reduce it to $2 million, and I'll talk to Representative Jackson Sayama to put in the other $2 million.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Councilmember Cordero.
Thank you, Chair Okimoto. Oh, first off, I second that, not second, but I agree with that recommendation, but thank you. I also have a question for Director Alger. I know that we did talk about the hopeful and possible project that could come from our already city assets, such as the stations that was just mentioned, the Kalawao and Pearl Ridge Station, especially in an area that does have city property, whether it be hard NDTS property. And so if you mentioned that $4 million is half of your budget. So where does the planning and contracting for development plans come from in your budget then?
And thank you very much for the question, Councilmember Cordero. And we are actively looking at the Pearl Ridge site. We've met with DTS years ago when I first came on board, approximately 2 years ago, to evaluate that site. They're currently in the process of building out a multimodal hub in that area, on that land, and they're doing that with federal funding. And we don't want to get in the way of that right now. My understanding is that RFP is expected to go out before the end of this fiscal year. They'll bring on a contractor before about the end of the second quarter of next fiscal year, and then complete development in about a year, 18 months thereafter. And so as they're working through that process, we'll be looking at the site and interior circulation for potential housing and other mixed-use applications there. With respect to, so I think does that answer your question?
So my question was, you mentioned that $4 million is basically half or almost all of your operating budget. And so where does planning for development or even contracting development sites in our already city assets come from within your city budget?
Great, thank you for that, and thanks for the clarification. That would come from CIP monies, particularly for the mixed-use developments that we're doing along rail, the Skyline.
Thank you for that clarification and response. And thank you, Chair Okimoto.
Thank you, Councilmember Cordero. Members, any further discussion or questions for the Department of Housing and Land Management? Thank you, Director Alger. Moving to the bottom of page 13, members from the Department of Community Services. And as Director Krucky comes up here, I'll read for the proposed amendment for community assistance. Again, the proposed amendment is to reduce current expenses by $135,000. The recommendation is to accept but amend description to read, reduce funding for current expenses for OC 3009, other contractual services in the amount of $135,000. Thank you, Director Krucky, for being here with us.
Thank you, Chair Okamoto, council members. with respect to this amount, this 135,000 that's listed as general funds, actually it is Section 8 federal funding, and it's federal 470 for Section 8, and so that block of funds really, we would ask to just stay there because it's been given to us by the federal government. Also, it's important to note that we use that set of expenses and contractual arrangements in Section 8. That was the backdrop of our expense budget that allowed us to continue to guarantee that we would service rents during the government shutdown. So it's important funding for us to have. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Krucky. Members, questions or discussion? Councilmember Kiaina.
Thank you, Chair. I don't have a discussion on this item, but a discussion with Director on the Grants and Aid Advisory Commission. First of all, thank you to you and your staff for all of the hard work that you guys put into the awards. I was quite pleased with just the time put into it because you really got a diversity of programs. As you know, I had proposed a $2 million addition to be able to fund 10 more organizations. And I understand that I will be working with the chair on some technicality of how I had proposed the amendment in concert with the Office of Council Services. But I just, can I ask you, would $2 million, I know that you guys are constrained by your own positions, but I have to ask, with $2 million, how many more organizations would be able to fund it if we were to provide $2 million?
When I looked at the list and reviewed that with my team, that'd be probably 10 more grants that could be done, but that's also a workload issue. We'd have to at least add one more staff to the team to be able to execute.
Okay, I may have missed that. I'll work with my staff in the second round. I may have forgotten to put a staff member. I think that was my mistake. Anyway, I just look forward to working with you on strengthening the capacity of your program and to provide more direct funding to our nonprofit organizations.
Thank you.
Thank you, Florida Kiaina. Members, any further questions or discussion for Director Krucky? Thank you for your
Chair, I did.
Director Krucky. Oh, I'm sorry. Hello, Councilmember Wire. Thank you for joining us virtually.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Apologies for not being there in person. I'm in Wailoa right now. I'll just be joining briefly. For DCS, just wanted to note we did have an amendment that was proposed. We hope that the committee will consider it going forward. It was putting additional funds forward for food access. Essentially, those funds would be utilized by local organizations and nonprofits to fill gaps in terms of the challenges they face when utilizing other funds to provide meals to the community. Would just note that, the city already specifically is working in the space of kupuna meal access. And of course, I think going forward, we did the presentation in committee last, was it January, where the food bank came and presented and talked about just the growing number of households that were very insecure in terms of food access. I think it was 168,000 individuals and households on Oahu that, that whether skip meals or don't eat for the whole day. That's a lot of people. And of course, that's only going to get worse as we look at the eligibility criteria that's been put forward. I'm just sharing this now because that was a specific DCS amendment. And I think that, they would have the capacity to get those funds out to the community. Just wanted to also flag, sorry I wasn't on earlier, but I am concerned and I hope the committee will reevaluate the cuts to the Office of Economic Revitalization. They're out here on the ground right now. I think there's a lot of work going on in the community to really position us to have an economic recovery for, of course, island-wide all the impacts, but especially on the North Shore. I know they've been an office that's been bringing in federal funds and spending federal funds in a great amount, so grateful for that, of course. And I'm just flagging that I'll have additional proposed amendments, I think, for the second round, but I'll just share that. And for logistics purposes, I'm here alone right now in the hallway, and then I'm going to go ahead and sign off. And so,
thank you, Councilmember Wire.
Mahalo, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you. Members, any further discussion? Director Krucky, really quickly, because I know that part of the Councilmember Wires asked was not included in the CD. Was that something that the department was asking for in your budget?
No.
Okay, thank you. Members, any further discussion at this time? Thank you for being here with us. And just so that for the members and the departments who are here to know, we will be taking a lunch break after we're done with operating budget. Thank you for your patience. We'll now proceed with page 14 through 16 from the for cultural recreation for the Department of Parks and Recreation. And I know I did see Director Thielen here with us. So I will be reading from pages 14 through 16, and we'll take them all, and then we'll turn it over to the director and then to members for discussion. On page 14, the proposed amendment is to add current expense funds to support adding to the tree canopy in Council District 4 in the proposed amount of $200,000. The recommendation is to accept but amend the description to read, add funding for current expenses, add proviso, at least $200,000 out of current expenses shall be appropriated to add to the tree canopy in Council District 4 for the amount of $200,000. Proposed amendment for maintenance support services, that was, I'm sorry, then the previous item was under urban forestry program. And now for maintenance support services, proviso language only. The recommendation is to accept but add amount and move to Bill 2026 CD1 Executive Capital Budget and Program, $478,000 for the restoration of the Alawai Community Park shower facilities. On page 15, for MSS as well, the next three will be for MSS. Proposed amendment, add funding for current expenses, add proviso, at least $500,000 out of current expenses shall be appropriated for overt video monitoring at city parks and park and ride facility per resolution 25-128 in the amount of $500,000. The recommendation is to accept but amend description to read, add funding for current expenses, add proviso, at least $500,000 out of current expenses shall be appropriated for overt video monitoring at city parks and city park and ride facilities in accordance with Resolution 25-128 CD1 FD1 in the amount of $500,000. Add funding for current expenses, add proviso, at least $500,000 out of current expenses shall be appropriated for installation of dog park, and $500,000 out of current expenses shall be appropriated for turf and electrical improvements at the pavilion of Ke'ehi Lagoon Beach Park in the proposed amount of $1 million. The recommendation is to accept but split amount with the next amendment, and I'll read it below, and amend description to read, add funding for current expenses, add proviso, at least $500,000 out of current expenses shall be appropriated for the installation of a dog park at Ke'ehi Lagoon Beach Park in the amount of $500,000. And the next proposed amendment is to add funding for current expenses, add proviso, at least $500,000 out of current expenses shall be appropriated for installation of dog park, and $500,000 out of current expenses shall be appropriated for turf and electrical improvements at the pavilion at Ke'ehi Lagoon Beach Park. The recommendation is to accept but amend amount and amend description to read, add funding for current expenses, add proviso, at least $500,000 out of current expenses shall be appropriated for turf and electrical improvements at the Ke'ehi Lagoon Beach Park Pavilion, and that was again split from the measure, the item right above it, in the amount of $500,000. On page 16, the proposed amendment, the next two are also related to MSS, is to add funding for current expenses, add proviso, at least $10,000 out of current expenses shall be appropriated for the installation of signage for the renaming of Waianae District Park to the Shinye, Nakamine, and 100th Infantry Battalion Memorial Park in the amount of $10,000. The recommendation is to accept but amend description to read, add funding for current expense, add proviso, at least $10,000 out of current expenses shall be appropriated for the installation of signage for the renaming of Waianae District Park to the Shinye, Nakamine, and 100th Infantry Battalion Memorial Park Waianae District Park in the amount of $10,000. And finally, to add funding for current expenses, add proviso at least $25,000 out of current expenses shall be appropriated for the installation of a cattle gate at Kapuni Beach Park in the amount of $25,000. The recommendation is to accept but amend description to read, add funding for current expenses, add proviso, at least $25,000 out of current expenses shall be appropriated for the installation of a cattle gate at Kapuni Neighborhood Park in the amount of $25,000. Thank you, Director Thielen, for being here with us.
Thank you, Budget Chair and members of the Council. Laura Thielen on behalf of the Department of Parks and Recreation. I did hear the requests from the Council members that if we are going to be recommending not adding to the budget, that we identify what we can do, and so I will do that. But I do want to say, you know, the challenge is to pass, for you folks, is to pass a balanced budget. And so one of the reasons that we are coming forward and in some cases asking not to add it in is we know then there has to be a subtraction somewhere to offset the add. I know within our department, we have been very careful in coming forward with our recommendation for the budget. We certainly don't want to have subsequent cuts made to our budget to support certain things. And then I know that unlike the state, the city departments really rely on each other. So we rely on DFM for our electrical work. We rely on DIT to put things together. We don't want their budgets cut because then it would reduce the support services that they could provide to us. So we appreciate your understanding in our representations. So beginning with the urban forestry program, the $200,000 to add for tree planting. Respectfully, we understand the desire, we share the desire, but we ask that that not be put into the budget. The Division of Urban Forestry is doing a lot of tree planting. They have increased the amount of tree planting they're doing. They have found that ability to do that in their base budget, and they also have a community forestry person who is very active in seeking grants. We've also identified places where we can plant trees where we can get to the larger trees, which would be in parks, to ring athletic fields with trees so people, the players can play out in the sun and the grass is, you know, it's open, but then spectators can be in the shade and the athletes can have a place to take a break during their half times. So we're putting a lot more tree planting into parks, and the benefit is it's a little less expensive than doing it out in the street tree area because we can tap into irrigation and be a little bit more cost effective in that. So that strategy has allowed us to be able to stretch our existing dollars a little bit more. For the second item, for the Alawai Community Park shower, yes, you have appropriately identified that as a CIP rather than a operating budget expense. So we'll defer comment on that. For the overt video monitoring, the $500,000, I know a lot of people do support video monitoring and thinking that it will reduce crime. We are asking not to be adding this to the budget. We have found in parks where we do have placed video monitors, it doesn't necessarily reduce crime. It does help HPD. I have film that may be identifying people, but it's not eliminated crime in those parks. And I think the city, you know, if it is desiring to put video monitoring in parks, probably needs to have more of an assessment of all of the parks to determine locations, whether there is Wi-Fi to be able to service it in the desired locations, you know, and then to have an overall plan. We currently do not have a plan for that. For the next two items, it was originally a combined item of $1 million, but has been broken into two items for Ke'ehi Lagoon Beach Park. We just want to say in the $500,000 for the dog park, again, we respectfully ask that that not be added. And then for the $500,000 for the electrical, DPR does not do electrical. So again, that may possibly be a CIP project as opposed to an operating budget project. I'm not really clear. The next item for MSS for signage, and then the last item for MSS for the cattle gate. We can see what we can do because those are small amounts within our existing budgets. We ask that those not be added. And I did hear the conversation with DFM, so on that item. Thank you. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Director Thielen. Members, questions for our DPR Director? Nope. Okay, thank you so much. Okay, we will now proceed with pages 17 and 18 from the Department of Enterprise Services. I saw with us, we have Director Dita Hollyfield, and I will, as she's coming up again, members, I will be reading the proposed amendments for this department. Starting on page 17, for auditoriums, the proposed amendment is to add current expense funds of $4 million, and the recommendation is to accept but move to DHLM under administration. See page 13 of this worksheet. Under administration, add position and funds to support a buskers program, and that's the proposed amount is $50,000 with a 1.0 FTE position. The recommendation is to accept but amend fund code and amend description to read, add a position and funding for salaries, add proviso, at least $50,000 out of salaries shall be appropriated to support a buskers program in the Waikiki Shell District. And the recommendation also is to accept the 1 FTE in the amount of $50,000. And at the top of page 18, under administration, the proposed amendment is to add current expense funds to support a buskers program in the amount of $100,000. The recommendation is to accept but amend fund code and amend description to read, add funding for current expenses, add proviso, at least $100,000 out of current expenses shall be appropriated to support a buskers program in the Waikiki Special District in the amount of $100,000. Thank you, Director Hollyfield, for being here with us.
Good morning, Chair. Dita Hollyfield, Director of Enterprise Services. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to share today. I wanted to ask a quick clarification question. Now that the $4 million looks like it was moving to a different department, would I be able to address that as well, or should I move on to the other two?
If you would like to, you're welcome to.
All right, mahalo. So I just wanted to share my thoughts about the acquisition of the theater in that area. I have some concerns just about what I think that it could do for the community, and that is if we think about Mamiya Theater, which is just down the road at the St. Louis, and that's a 500-seater. We also have the Manoa Valley Theater, which is in the same area on some levels. So I just worry about how many small type of venues such as that would be viable, and we could really make the revenue. So I just wanted to put my thoughts out in terms of that and just in the location and the competition that's already there. So I just wanted to share. And then in terms of the adding a position to support the buskers program and the buskers program, I feel at this point that the concessions team, which would be the partnerships that would be included in this particular idea, I worry about where we are currently with our concessions and the Kona low storms. We had some major damage, as everybody else is, but currently we've got the driving range on the Alawai Golf Course is really compromised. We've got a lot of beachfront concessions as well, and so I worry about where we are. It's hard to commit to anything in addition currently when we don't even know where we're going to be in terms of our existing concessions. So I do not think at this time this is a good idea for DES. We need to concentrate on the teams and our clients that we already have in place, and we are going to respectfully decline at this point to be involved in the buskers program. I'm open for any questions.
Thank you, Director Hollyfield. Members, questions for Enterprise Services? Chair Waters.
Thank you. I appreciate your comments regarding the Queen Theater, but using your same logic, perhaps we shouldn't put the money in for the roof for Blaisdell because the state's planning to build a 4,500-seat concert hall next to Aloha Stadium. Just a thought, but thank you.
Thank you, Chair Waters. Any further discussion? Okay. Thank you, Director Hollyfield. Did you want to?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Members, finally on page 19 under miscellaneous. There are 3 items here for provision for judgments, settlements, and losses. The proposed amendment is to reduce funding for current expenses, and the recommendation is to accept that in the amount of $1.5 million. Provision for homeless activities is, the proposed amendment is to add funding for current expenses and add proviso at least $1 million out of current expenses shall be appropriated for service to reduce and mitigate the effects of homelessness in Council District 5 in the amount of $1 million. The recommendation is to accept it in the amount of $1 million. And also for provision for homeless activities, the proposed amendment is to reduce funding for current expenses, and the recommendation is to accept it in the amount of a reduction in $3 million. I think that was it for miscellaneous. Members, if we have any questions, I'm assuming Director Kawano, would we welcome you to come up, Director, and then I'll turn it over to members for questions.
Yes, Andy Kawano, Director of Budget and Fiscal Services. We, at this time, because of what's going on, with the Kona low recovery process, there's a very good chance once we have firmer numbers, and MD will talk to you about it tomorrow, we're going to have to propose using the Fiscal Stability Fund to cover, one-time expenses to assist in recovery. So, if the ads causing the reductions to these provisionals are generally non-recurring as well, we suggest that we hold off from reducing the provisionals because, they're proposed for a reason. And we should probably take a hard look maybe with CD2 as to what we're going to do with it. But our request is not to reduce the provisionals. If the judgment and losses provisional supports the fact that there are cases still active that could have very large settlements during 27. And, Anton continues to do good work with homeless activities. There's a large $3 million reduction there. So we suggest that we hold off on reducing them. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Kawano. Members, any questions or discussion for Director Kawano or any other department who may still be here? Thank you, Director Kawano. Okay, members, that takes us to the end of the proposed amendments for the operating budget. So that concludes the discussion on Bill 22, 2026. I want to thank all of you for your proposed amendments and for working through this process. I know that as Committee Vice Chair Nishimoto said, when these amendments were proposed, this was before the Kona low storm. So I understand that going through this process moving forward, we have to take into account a lot of other factors that probably were not considered initially. That being said, the chair will consider suggesting amendments and comments discussed today in the CD2. There was a lot of discussion based on the departments and their input based on our amendments. With that being said, however, the chair recommends that Bill 22, 2026 be amended to a CD1 that incorporates the changes described during the discussion today and makes any technical and non-substantive amendments that may be necessary. Any discussion or objections to the CD1? Any reservations? If not, the bill has been amended to a CD1. The chair then recommends that Bill 22, 2026, CD1 be reported out for second reading and scheduling of a public hearing. Any discussion, any objections or reservations? Hearing none, so ordered. Okay, members, at this time, it is 12:29. We will be taking a break for lunch. We'll do 45 minutes again, if that's okay. So we'll reconvene at 1:15 recess.